My name is Jolijn Santegoeds.
Yes.
And my organization is called Mind Rights.
Mind
Rights.
Rights.
It's an advocacy organization run by users, survivors of psychiatry from the Netherlands, and we protest against forced treatments. When I was 16, I was forcefully institutionalized against my will because I did suicide attempts. And then I came in the institution and I looked around me and I felt like I had lost absolutely everything. So I tried to commit suicide again. And then they called me a danger to myself. So then I was put into solitary confinement, into isolation cell. And well, that got worse and worse. I kept on trying self-harm and suicide. Then I was strapped on the bed, I was drugged, and they even did forced body cavity search, which means they undressed me and looked in my intimate zones with force, with several people on top of me. And I still wanted to die, of course. So then, yeah, this became a long circle of almost 2 years. And then I had some medical injury, but the staff didn't believe me. So they neglected me. And then afterwards, when I went to the hospital, when I was allowed, they discovered this. And well, in the end, this bad ward was closed. And I was transferred to another ward with so-called intensive care for psychiatry, which was slightly better. And they treated me a bit more humane. I was allowed to go outside, and by then I kind of got my life back, and I wasn't so depressed anymore. I stopped suicide attempts, started to go outside, have fun, make music, eat candies, and then I chose for freedom. So I went away from this ward. I was allowed to leave after appealing against this forced stay because I was no longer suicidal. They had to let me go. So I went, and then I was homeless for about 2.5 years because I had no right for aftercare, because I had I left the institution without finishing treatment. But in my opinion, there was no real treatment, and I felt really much better off on the streets. So in the beginning, I was really scared because I had been locked up while I wasn't a criminal. So I was scared when I was outside on the streets. I was hiding in the bushes, and I did not dare to go to squat places because, yeah, I feared that I would go jailed. So, yeah, I think after a year, I started to make some contacts with other people who just came by on the streets. And from then on, I built my life. And I got a house, a place to live at least. And then I started studying. And during my study, I got this text message from another friend who said that another friend of him was also put in isolation cell in the same child institution as where I had been, because he had taken his dessert after dinner to his room, which was not allowed. And I got really upset by this news, and I was in school and I felt like I need to do something about this. So I went there, I took a train, I went there, and I felt like I need to do something, but I didn't know what to do. Then something in my head was going, public prosecution. So I felt like I must try to make this public. So I bought a big pile of papers, copying paper, and a big marker, and I wrote some slogans, and I hang them in the neighborhood of the institution, in the center, very visible. And then the next day it was in the newspaper saying anonymous protest against isolation cell in child psychiatry. So then I thought, well, this works. So from then on we started to do more protests, and a few years later we raised an official foundation called Mind Rights. And since then we are active in all kind of forms. We protest on the streets, we hand out leaflets, we go to conferences. I get invited for law reform processes. I am kind of an expert in the field by now as a user survivor. No, my story is quite exceptional. It doesn't happen to everybody, luckily. But I was one who got in really bad, and it was endless. And in my opinion, it was just a big fight. They were wanting things from me that I couldn't feel. Well, I felt like I had completely lost my life when I was in the institution. I couldn't go to school anymore, I didn't see my friends anymore. I had no more hobbies, I couldn't go swimming, which I used to do every day. I used to be very active in sports and it was all gone. I used to do music, it was all gone. So, and I was already suicidal, so I felt like they had taken what was left of my life. So I felt like I couldn't go any deeper. So to me, being institutionalized kind of motivated me to end it, because I had already lost it. And especially in the isolation cell, I had no reason to live because it was not fun. And well, and I see a lot of people who go into institutions involuntarily and they feel the same. And in that way it's being detained. You're there against your will, and well, it doesn't help. And I think in the Netherlands there's a lot of people who get worse by psychiatry, and yeah, they get in with this big expectations of being helped because we're a rich country. They think, okay, now I will get help, and then basically they're abandoned in this big ward with 10 other people just sitting there all day, and a lot of people break down, and there's a high suicide rate, and the majority of people who commit suicide have already been in contact with mental health care, so they fail basically, which is really bad. And I think it is possible to do it in another way, in a better way. I'm absolutely convinced. So that's what I advocate for. And I think there's several thousands of people in the Netherlands who get put into institutions involuntarily every year. And it used to be standard procedure that people who go into mental health care go into an isolation cell at the day of admission, and they call it observation. But of course, when you put somebody without a criminal record in a cell, this person will become upset. So then they justify the forced admission by that. They say, you see, this person is upset. So in this way, it's like a weird system. It's like another world, actually, another culture hidden in the regular culture. When you enter that door of psychiatry, you get in a complete other world with different rules, different ways of dealing with each other. It's shocking. Well, at some point I got isolation cell treatment, which meant that I was full day in there, and then had several contact moments, as it was called, which generally lasted 5 minutes. And they came to give me my food, or well, in the morning I was allowed to shower, but they did it with supervision. So, and I was basically all the time in there. And at some point even conversations and music and everything became forbidden because they said it was upsetting me. But yeah, and in total it was almost 2 years that I spent in there, at age 16, 17, which is a waste. Yeah, and they called it treatment. Yeah, it was really horrible. Sometimes I was naked in this cell, and then, well, after some time your hair starts growing, you know, and you know you look ugly, and you don't cut your nails, and all these things, you know. I felt totally dehumanized, and especially, well, I was so desperate when I was in there that I ripped cloth apart and I tried to strangulate myself with it. So then they took everything away, and I was in there naked. There was not even a toilet, just a paper cup where you can put your things in. You know, it's less than an animal, really. And when you're strapped on a bed, it's horrible. You cannot even kill a mosquito, you know, it's insane. And I think these practices need to be abolished. I know in east of Europe they still have cage beds and stuff like that. That's absolutely torture. There is no justification to call this mental health care because it's not contributing to well-being at all. It's just making it worse. I always say care is supposed to be the best thing that people can do to each other, but coercion is the worst thing. So how can this be mixed up? It cannot be mixed up. It's two completely different things. Care is a wonderful thing. It's like human contact. And forced treatments are the opposite. So to me, if it were up to me, they should really distinguish these things. And that's also the core of my activism. Well, it's a bit of a hard question, because when I was in there, I tried to kill myself all the time. And, well, I managed to survive, but, you know, even after all, I don't know how I succeeded in that. I could have been that as well. I didn't expect to get out alive. For me, it was really the end station of my life. I really expected to die there. And so did others, because I was completely a hopeless case. I was trying to commit suicide every day. You know, whenever I had the chance to eat anything, I would eat teaspoons, I would eat glass. Anything that got near me, I tried to eat it or cut myself with it or harm myself, kill myself. And because I was in this bad situation, and I really tried to kill myself in various ways. And you know, I'm only lucky that I got out. And it was only afterwards that I decided that I can never ever do any other suicide attempt, because I don't want to go back to that place. That's motivated me to become strong, to stay away from psychiatry, because I got out, which is a miracle, and I treasure that. So it's like a anti-motivation. It works the other way, and that cannot be called care. Well, I see mental health problems as life problems. So you cannot take it out of life and then deal with it. It's part of life. So the solution also is in life. So it's the word psychosocial is really accurate, because it's the combination of the person's psychological state and the social situation. And those are related. Just when I was having the suicide feelings, it was related to the position I was in. I was in a very bad situation with isolation cells, so I wanted to kill myself. And those things, you cannot deal with them separately, because it was connected. And I think, yeah, for me, my so-called illness, depression, got better when I was in a better situation. That's the social dimension, and I think it works that way. And depression and also psychosis, they all have a social cause. It originates from being overwhelmed by the things life throws at you. And you know, when it becomes too much, you have to find a way to deal with that. And you know, when it's too much, some people panic, others break down. It's like a personal thing and also a kind of, yeah, I think it's character or something on how you react on these situations. Some persons start crying, others become angry. That's just it. But you cannot isolate feelings from life. You know, sometimes I think psychiatry is looking at us as robots. But life is much more than that. We are not a problem that can be fixed or something. We're humans. Yeah, it's much more complex than just so-called depression or so-called psychosis. It's a part of life, and it's dealing with the hard issues. Because life isn't always good and happy, and I know a lot of people who get overwhelmed, and at some point they just lose the logic. They cannot understand why things go like this. And then they get messed up and end up having a psychosis. But in the end, it all originates just from life, actually. I think good care does exist. If I look at my mother, who sometimes had psychiatric problems as well. She had been psychotic several times. And I recognize after I have been through psychiatry myself, I really get a good view on what happens to her. Because when she gets upset, that's how I would like to call it, she gets scared of persons. But I'm her daughter, you know, I've got a special position in her life. So when she's upset and closes the door for everybody, I can still come in because she trusts me. So then I can talk to her, and sometimes I can even convince her to say, like, maybe you should talk to some professional. And it's really the way communication goes. Because this really happened. At one point, my mother really rejected to have carers in her house, but she was psychotic at that time, and it was really a hard time. And then, well, I went to her and I talked to her, and I expressed my concerns. I said I was worried about her well-being. She was willing to accept that, but on the same time she only wanted to talk to women. And well, the ambulance was waiting outside, and of course one of the persons in there was a man. And then I went out to the carers and I said, well, my mom is willing to talk to you, but only to a woman. And then the woman came in and talked to my mom, and it was fine, and my mom was willing to be admitted. And then the man from the ambulance had to come in to say to make the signature. And the moment he got in, my mom became upset. But at that point, the responsible doctor was a man, and he had to sign and blah blah blah. But this caused escalation, while it wouldn't have been necessary. And I think it is possible to deal with that in a better way if you just be really careful to what this person needs. The same goes for me. When I was institutionalized, the cell wasn't doing me any good. The institution on itself was not doing me any good. And they could have been more clever with me. They could have done it in another way. I'm convinced that if I would have stayed at home and not being institutionalized at all, it would have been better for me. I'm really convinced. And I still, I really think force is the problem, and the lack of attention, the lack of reflection, and really going into the life problems. I've also developed an alternative model for the law on forced treatments. It's based on family group conferencing, because when you face life problems, when you are really upset and in a hard phase, it sometimes can be really hard to have the overview or to make clear expressions on what you want or how you want to deal with it. So this family group conferencing is like you invite your friends and your family, the persons you trust, and you go sit in a group, and then you discuss the issue. And the issue can be like, for me it could have been, I want to live in my own house in a safe way without committing suicide. And then you can discuss what is needed. And then I could have told what makes me feel like committing suicide. And then others can give me ideas on how to deal with that. And then I can select whatever I want. So, and it's really interesting because people who know you for a lifetime, like friends or family, they sometimes know more about you than you yourself. So they might actually come up with very good ideas that you haven't thought of by yourself, because you are in distress and because you cannot oversee things. And by having this equal conversation, it's like a brainstorm session with the people you trust, you can really get into the deep. And if you go to a psychiatrist, you talk to a stranger and you can tell them about your life, but you will never really understand what's going on, because if you talk about your partner, the psychiatrist doesn't know your partner, so he basically just has to guess. And especially when you're in distress, the psychiatrist might make their own conclusion, and that can be really bad. So that's why I really believe in this family group conferencing model as a tool for at least making a plan on what is needed for this person. And when I was homeless, I tried to have a house, because sleeping outside is not very safe. But there were all kind of additional criteria they wanted to put on me. Well, that wasn't helping me. And even in this situation, a family group conference could have helped me, because then it could have really been addressed, like, okay, this is happening, and this is not happening, because I was perceived as a very severe psychiatric patient. And even the housing company said it was too big of a risk to give me a house. But I had never been violent to other persons, I have never been like destroying things without a reason or something. Only in the isolation cell I was really harming myself, but it was myself. It was not, I did not attack other people. But you know, once you go in the books as severe mental health patient, you get stigmatized and prejudiced, and it follows you everywhere basically. And yeah, I think those psychiatric tools and mechanisms are just not helping. And I think it is possible to have a really good form of community-based system which really makes use of the strength of people, the connections and like, yeah, social unity. And that's what I would call good care, because people want to have a life, and life is here, you know, life is in the community, and being in an institution, it is no life. Yeah, because I was thinking about the current discussion in Hungary.
Please?
The current discussion in Hungary about the institutionalization. I heard there was this plan that the big institutions with hundreds of people, they will be broken down, which is very good. Then I heard there was a plan for making institutions with 50 people. I think it's still very impersonal, and it opens a door for human rights violations, because people are not persons but just a group there, and this is really dangerous. And then I heard there's another push for like maybe really small scaled houses in the community for maybe 10 persons. And I think it can be good, but it still is something that really needs to be done with care. Because my brother, he lives in a sheltered house with 6 or 7 other persons, and he's really happy there. He has a Down syndrome, and well, he is helped. Well, in the morning his food is waiting for him basically, and they help him with the daily things. But I also know several mental health patients, users, how they call it. And they also live in sheltered houses, but they are forced to live there. And they don't like it at all. I know people who are forced to live with other people in the same house, and they have not had any say in who they live there with. So I know a girl who has sexual trauma. She lives together with a person who used to be an offender. She is scared, of course, but this is her living situation. This is her house. So, and she is forced to live there because of some community treatment order. And of course, this woman is very unhappy. So even in small-scaled institutions, bad things can happen. It's just, I think the choice aspect is the most crucial thing in every form of care. If you have choice, then it has potential to become good. But if you're forced, it will still be an open door for human rights violations. And that's what I would want to add.